Sometimes I lose the fight, try my best, but just don't get it right. Well, I talk the talk that I don't walk and miss the moments right before my eyes. Somebody with a hurt that I could have helped, somebody with a hand that I could have held. I just can't see past myself, Lord, help me be
a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me.
Yeah, there's no denying I have changed. I've been saved from who I used to be. Even at my best, I must confess, I still need help to see the way you see. Somebody with a hurt that I could have helped, somebody with a hand that I could have held. I just can't see past myself, oh help me be
a little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Oh, I want to feed the beggar on the street, love to be your hands and feet, freely give what I receive, Lord help me be. I want to put you first above all else, love my neighbor as myself, in the moments no one sees, Lord help me be.
1, 2, 3.
A little more like mercy, a little more like grace, a little more like kindness, goodness, love and faith, a little more like patience, a little more like peace, a little more like Jesus, oh, a little less like me, a little more like living everything I preach, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. Oh, a little less like me.
All right, everybody, how you doing today? Welcome to Spiritual Principles of Recovery. I'm so glad you're here. Everyone that's here tonight and everyone that's online. Man, let's go ahead and start it out with a serenity prayer. Let's go. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And y'all know that means it also means to accept people that I don't. Anyway, that's a whole other subject for another night, and we will talk about that, I promise you. But if you remember, how many of y'all were here last week? Raise your hand. Man, cool. All right, you remember that was part 1, and this is part 2, right? Generally, I thought it was part 1. But anyway, so what I wanted to do is pick back up on what we talked about last week, which was trauma. But the thing is, how it causes issues and certain things in your life. But I want to get into the solution tonight, right? We talked about what all it can do, how it holds us captive, how there are different types of traumas. Y'all remember that? There's big trauma and small trauma. But they're all very, effective in the same way, a lot of the same ways in our lives. So let's talk about tonight something a little bit different. Breaking free from your trauma. Man, isn't that exciting? Because here's what I'm really telling you, is there's a way to break free. I don't know about you guys, but that was exciting when I realized I no longer had to live by the way that I experienced trauma. that I did find freedom and true freedom. So last week we talked all about being trapped in trauma, and this week we're going to talk about being free. But we also looked at how trauma, if you don't deal with it, can affect your life for a long period of time. And here's the problem. We don't even know it's affecting our life. It can cause depression, right? It can cause fear. It can cause narcissism. It can cause a lot of things that we don't even realize is happening in our lives. Well, what we want to look at is the solution of not just breaking free, but how to overcome it. See, breaking free is one thing, but then it's what did you do without it? In other words, if I let something go, I got to replace it with something, right? And that's what we're going to look at. So here's the thing, is that what I have to realize is that sometimes you can actually find strength in your past. Now, I know you're going, yeah, but if I got a real screwed up past, how am I going to find strength in that? Well, we're going to take a look. So we will also look at how grief and trauma can separate you from God. Or it can actually bring you closer. Right? You see, a lot of times what we have to do is we have to begin to take on responsibility for our own recovery. Y'all heard that before, I hope. Right? I'm not responsible for people's recovery. They're responsible for their recovery, just like I am responsible for my own recovery. So what does that mean? It means that for a long time, I looked at God must really have an issue with me. Because you see, if he loved me, I wouldn't have gone through that. And as we talked about last week, we have free will. And unfortunately, God doesn't just step in and stop people from their free will. But yet he knows what you went through. He knows what you went through. He hurt for what you went through. I promise you that. And he also hurt for the person that did whatever they did to you. So that's one of the things that I think that starts that process of how am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to say, over there, God? Or am I going to choose to start thinking about it and say, maybe you love me enough? Or how about this one? Maybe I've been misguided about you long enough to where I'm willing to see what you're really all about. See, until you have a relationship with anybody, you don't ever know what they're about. A lot of times we think, man, I'd like to have that person in my life. Until you get to know them. Right? And let's just say some folks present real. You know what I mean by that? It's like some people come across a little more better than they are. But one of the other things is that we have to realize that my past is not my future. I hope you guys can grab hold of that. Your past is not your future. Right? Because if that was the case, I'd still be a little spoiled brat, right? It would be still living in self-centered living. Any of y'all went through that self-centered living? Did you have to walk away from that to start your recovery? Yeah, at least you had to make an attempt to, right? It's no longer about moi. It's actually about how can I be of service to others. See, that's the difference. So let's take a look at that. See, I'm not only my past, but I'm also what? What are you? A child of the Most High God. If you have God in your life, then you're what? You're a child. Y'all do know that everybody in the world is not a child of God. That's right. Okay. We choose to be in his family, or we choose not to be in his family. And he loves us enough to be respectful enough to let us make those choices. But let's see what Galatians 5:1 says. It says, so Christ has truly done what? Set us free. So now make sure that you, wow, this is interesting. So now make sure that you what? Stay free. Oh, that's an action, is it not? Right? If I sit there and you're like, you keep falling off the porch. I've done that one before. But you fall off the porch, and I'm like, why don't you stay away from the edge of the porch? Don't you have a choice to keep moving forward, make sure that you stay back? So that's an action. And you don't get tied up again in what? Slavery to the law. Man, here's my deal. I just don't want to be back in that trauma. You see, when I'm back in that trauma, then what am I? I'm a slave to that trauma. It's just like relapsing. Right? So, before you relapse, you have choices. Yeah, I have a choice whether I'm decide to pick up or not, correct? But once I make that stupid decision, where'd my choices go? Right? So what choice did I make? I chose to put myself back in slavery. So every time I would go back to that trauma and I would start judging myself by that trauma, or I would begin to look at others through that trauma, or relationships through that trauma, what did I do? I went back and put myself in that slavery again. See, I don't do that, right? And that's what we do anytime we go back to anything. The word's pretty clear. It says that when we go back to something, that's like what? It's like a dog going back to its vomit. I get it. I've been a dog, and I've gone back there, and I've ended up where? Right back in that place going, God, help me get through this one. Show me how to get through this one. Man, all I know is that God is so good, He wants to free you. So here it is. I'm not going to belabor the point on what all it does to you. Let's go ahead and start looking at what it can do for you. Right? In other words, when I go into my recovery, what does that do? So I'm going to use a friend's story. Y'all remember I mentioned that, right? And I'm going to use a friend's story. And I'm not going to use their real name. Okay? So tonight we're just going to call them Sue. All right? But what I want you to see about Sue is the story how she got through her trauma. She actually got victory over her trauma. One of the things I think about, and I'll be quite honest with you, I called her today because I was like, as I was putting her story down, it began to just do something to me emotionally. It began to break me emotionally because I watched the trauma in my mind, what she went through. But we're going to talk about how she didn't stay there. So Sue was, she was molested when she was 6 years old. And that's when it started, by a family member. And she was molested by somebody who a child would trust. And it continued to go on for years until she was 15 years old. And the only reason it stopped at 15 was she got pushed out to go marry somebody. Right? And that was marriage number 1 of 5 marriages before she was 30 years old. And you go, wow, how can that be? Because you see, she never could trust a man. So she was always looking at the next one. Where can they get me? How can they take care of me? But the problem is when we put our energy into a man taking care of us, or a woman, the problem with that is we were never designed as men to take care of women 100%. You know why? Because that's God's place. So you know what that means? It means that we will fail how much of the time? 100% of the time. You see, until we can get hold of the fact that it is not about one person meeting all my needs, it's about 2 people coming together and learning how to trust God to meet all their needs. Some of us are there. Some of us aren't. But here's the thing. Think about it. Ask yourself, have I put everything into that relationship? Oh, and it goes both ways, guys. Don't think that it's all on us, right? How many times have you looked at a woman and think to yourself, wow, she could take care of everything. Or she's a project and I need to take care of her. That's the really messed up way. That's a whole codependent issue for a whole nother night. But here's the thing. Not only did she go through those 5 marriages before she was 30, But each one did emotional damage. How? Because each one taught her something. What was that? Mental failure, mental failure, mental failure. What else did it teach her, though? You can never trust her. Can't trust a man. And she did for a long time. So her trauma literally taught her not, like, is not a choice, but not to trust anyone, especially anyone in authority. Well, her life changes, and finally her trauma actually paid off for a period of time. So you see, Sue begins to figure out that men are not the answer. So it's got to be something else, right? So being really good at having to be a survivor and live through trauma, what she did is that she started to learn that I'm the only one that can take care of me. It's all on me. Now, what kind of a mixed up situation is that? You're looking for someone else to take care of you, but now you figure out I'm the only one that can take care of me, but you never feel like that you're good enough. Isn't that nuts? Yeah. You know what that creates? Self-centered living. Think about it, guys. How many times were you out there doing the do, right? And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, my life's really screwed up. But at the same time, you're thinking, I'm the only one that can take care of me. Y'all see the confusion with that? Okay, I mean, I'm hoping so. And of course, she was living in that. So what she did was she looked at that and she realized that she was kind of abandoned. I know that sounds weird, but all of a sudden she started getting in touch with her abandonment, right? And that's why she thought, I won't be abandoned anymore if it's just me. Well, guess what? She didn't trust anybody, including God. So that's when she began to realize that the only one that was going to take care of her was her. And the only one that was going to take care of her child was her. See? So what do you got to have to take care of yourself? Come on. Right? It's the Benjamins, correct? Got to have some cashish to take care of yourself. So she started realizing how important that dollar was. And she chased it a lot of different ways. But here's the thing. See, sometimes trauma does work for you. Because you start feeling like, if I'm not good enough, I got to be better than everybody else. And so what she did is she became a financial planner. Now, this is somebody who pretty much left school when they got married. So, not a lot of education. And yet she goes and she gets one of the most difficult licenses there is to get. Because you see, she had always felt less than, so therefore she was willing to do more than, which is a real trait of a lot of survivors. She became the number one salesperson in her company. It's a large company, I'm familiar with it. And I'm not going to go all into it, but she sold the hardest product to sell and became number one. That doesn't even make sense, I'm telling you. And so the point is that she began to realize, I got money. I got a little bit of pull. People going to respect me, right? I'm going to conference. That's a big deal. Or convention. That's a big deal when you're in that industry. And you're sitting there and you're going, man, I'm going to be recognized. The problem was the recognition wasn't enough. Because why? Because she kept going back to that trauma, right? And the more success she had, the more she saw herself like that little girl. Well, guess what? It all started to collapse. So after getting money, sobriety, house, some investments, on the outside, she was looking great. Looking great. Beautiful woman, looking great. But you see, that wasn't enough because the trauma damage was already starting to come back. Doesn't matter how far you run until you deal with it, it'll always be right there on your backside. Just waiting. It's just like anything else. What do we say about addiction? It's right outside the door doing what? doing push-ups, man. Just getting ready for you to walk out that door. Well, let me explain something to you. Trauma damage does the same thing. I don't care what kind of trauma. And let me tell you something. If you got PTSD, you got something like that, same thing. It's waiting to jump on you as soon as you walk out that door. Well, all of a sudden life wasn't as good as it was. The satisfaction, she just wouldn't experience it anymore. It didn't matter what she did, just there wasn't enough satisfaction anymore. Because why? She kept feeling less than. You see, what she really felt was damaged. Damaged goods. So all of a sudden, that self-centered living came back. Why not? Why not? Why not just give up? Or why not go be better? Or why not find another? God must not be on my side if there is a God. Because I've now accomplished all this stuff and I still feel empty inside. What a difference, right? That's why in Sue's life, she made sure that nobody got past those walls. She wasn't letting anybody in. And then that self-centered living came completely back. And what happens when that happens? I don't know about you guys, but I make some stupid decisions. Y'all ever make some stupid decisions? Yeah, that's what happened. So then all of a sudden, she started lying to herself. She started setting herself up for a false sense of security. And see, when that doesn't work, we go back and we hit the what? Reset button. So what did that mean? A little drinking won't hurt me. Because after all, I just want to be like everybody else at the marina. I just want to go hang out. I just want to drink a beer like anybody else. That's great till the blackouts happen. But then I got to be back on top of my game. What's the quickest way to get back on top of your game? She had enough money to have baggies full. Right? And so now she's running life, right? Because now she's doing the do, and she's running life, and everything's falling apart, and she's trying to keep holding it together. So she's got 1,000 balls up in the air. So when she finally lays her head down each night, where do you think she felt? Alone, abandoned, used. But then she decided to find a better way of life. And that's what I want to really talk about. You see, she got sober again. And this time she knew something had to change. I mean, the first time she stayed sober about 8 or 9 years. But she knew for this to really make a difference, something had to change. So Sue was going to have to do something she had never done before. She was going to have to do a real 4-step. Y'all know what I mean when I say a real 4-step? A complete and totally honest inventory. What's the 4-step? Let's go, guys, all one time. 1, 2, 3. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Fearless. What's the word after fearless? Moral. So you know a lot of us here, I am a piece of junk. So what I need to do is take an inventory that shows me just how bad I am. But it wasn't that. What she did is she started doing something different. She began to sit there and say, you know what? Maybe I need to fearlessly look at the truth of what happened to me. Let's look see what Luke 8:17 says. For all that is secret will eventually be brought out into the open. And everything that is concealed will be brought out to the light and made known to all. So you go, yeah, but man, it's like, I don't want that to happen. That's my biggest fear, is everybody's going to know. Everybody already knows, man. You're the last one to know. Everybody else does. But you see, she made a choice to bring it to the light, right? And when she brought it to the light, what happened? She began to experience freedom. And what a difference in her life that began to make. And that meant she got a whole new bag of recovery tools. Before I go there, I want to talk about a little bit more about Sue. Because I want to talk about who Sue is today. You see, Sue had a really good sponsor who was willing to hold her accountable to what she had done, but in love. And her sponsor really loved her and cared about her. And I'm glad she did. Because she needed that one-on-one love from another woman, not from another man at that time. And the thing was, she all of a sudden got to a point where she wasn't afraid of her past anymore. So let me tell you this. This is Sue's day, or life and day now. Sue's on the phone or on a Zoom call almost every day, right? And it's with other people that have gone through this situation, who've experienced the same thing. And you know what she does? She loves on them. That's what she does. Yeah. What else does she do? I've never met anybody who has a bigger heart than you. A bigger heart than this woman has. Right? I mean, she literally doesn't just love. She shows her love. She'll invest in people who need to be invested in. You see, one of the things that I love about her is that when I started working with her, she didn't know Jesus on a personal level. Sue knows Jesus today. And she talks about him all the time. She talks about her relationship. And you know what? I love it. She'll talk to me. And she'll be like, I read this in the Bible last night. You know, I sleep pretty good because I'm reading the Word. I'm not afraid anymore. I've never met anybody that has no problem talking about their past like she does. Now, she doesn't get real specific. She talks in a general way. But when there are other women who've gone through that, man, she gets right down there with them. And what she says, she's, let me tell you my story. And it makes a difference. Because I have other people who sit there and say, wow, I didn't think anybody else could relate to me. But she relates to me, and it's like she's okay with it. Why? Because you see, Sue is no longer stuck in the past. Yeah, she got victory over that. Now guess what she is? She's not damaged goods. She is a precious good to a lot of other people. You see, I can't think of anyone else that I know who literally took their trauma and turned it into something different. So like I said, she ended up with a whole new bag of tools. And she had to do some things different, right? Because recovery tools are important, aren't they? And I think sometimes we forget that we have these tools to use. But one of the first things she did is she realized that she could only talk to a few people. This was not a subject for everybody. But she talked to those people about the exact nature of what had happened to her. Because you don't want to go back and relive all that trauma. I've always had an issue in therapy parking in the trauma. Why do we got to sit there? I mean, I agree it's time to acknowledge it. But what I got to sit there in it, right? It's amazing to me. Literally, my mother is a psychologist and she's a therapist and she's and she's good at it. And one of the things I always thought was interesting was her feeling was if you ever need to see me more than 6 months, I haven't done my job. Because you see, she would identify it. And then she would turn around and she would talk about how it controlled their life. But then she would talk about what can we do to go past that. That's called victory. Not only did Sue have a good sponsor, but she had a good therapist. Sometimes we need that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not cutting that down. Please hear me. And there's a lot about trauma therapy. And you want to talk about one intense therapy? Right? So when I went through it, 2 hours a night, 2 nights a week, after 30 days of being patient. But you know what? It doesn't hold on to me anymore. It's not something that's controlling me anymore. See, one of the things you have to do is you have to make sure that you're working with someone who actually wants to see you grow. Y'all know there are some people that absolutely just get off on hearing these stories. It's like, tell me everything about you. I want to know more. Because I just like hearing it. See, that's the difference. When I started working with Sue, it changed things because the biggest thing I want to see in her life is her grow. And that's what you're looking for. And that's important to get through this. I mean, it has made it so much easier working with her because of the experience you had with the last sponsor. But here's the deal. You got to keep remembering, you're not alone in this. And how do I know that? Ephesians 3:20 tells me that. Come on, let's all look at it. Now, all glory to God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within us, to accomplish infinitely more than we can even ask or think. Does that sound like a God who wasn't around, or hasn't been around, or hates you, or has an issue with you, or wanted this to happen to you? No. What does he tell you? Man, I want more for you than you could even ask me for. So here's my thing. If he says he'll give you more, then how about this one? Father God, remove this trauma from my life. And here's the hard one on that. We won't lie on this one. If I forgive him, it's like it never happened. Here's the big thing. What we have to do, we have to confront. These are the 4 things. Confront. Use the word for change. You see, God says he'll renew the mind in the what? In the reading of the word. What's Sue do every night? She reads the word. Guys, I threw this challenge out at the first of the year, and it's been great. I've started doing it again. The Proverbs challenge. Read it before you go to bed, man. How many Proverbs are there? 31. Woo, one a day. Plus iron. So, I mean, all we got to do is do what? Begin to renew the mind. And here's the thing. If you had a lot of trauma in your life, please read the word at night, because I'm going to tell you something. That's when the enemy wants to work up here. Anybody ever had nightmares from their trauma? Yeah, I'll raise my hand. Y'all don't have to, but I have. Woke up in cold sweats, feeling like something had happened to me. Guess what? I hadn't had that in years, because I believed in the renewing of the mind. But here's the other one. You got to then delete and let go of shame. So guess what that means? Conscious decision. Yeah, conscious decision. I have to delete. What is that? That's an action, man. What does delete mean? Come on. Really, in reality, what does delete mean? If I delete something, it's what? Gone for how long? Ever. It's gone, man. But what about when I delete it, it just goes in the trash? And then I'm having a rough day or something, and I go looking in the trash. That's stupid. But how many times have we done that? So you know what I do? Sometimes you got to go double delete. That's the way you got to be with this. You got to be willing to say, you know what? It's gone and I don't want it. But here's the last one. Forgive. Oh man. Woo! I held on to something for 10 years. I thought I'd let it go for 10 years. And every time I had an issue with this person, you know what I did? Brought up the past. Because you know what that's called? Manipulation. Oh, ouch. Yeah. So here's the deal. When you forgive, It means you stop manipulating with it. Yeah. So that's the two parts of forgiveness, right? I got to totally let it go and never use it again. Can't use it as a bat to hit somebody over the head. And the second thing is, which is the most important, is that I got to be willing, even if it feels like you're getting away with something, to let it go. Do not, hear me on this, do not think that I think that people should not be held responsible, right? Church before the last church that I was involved in, we had a situation where we had a youth pastor who preyed on a 15-year-old young lady. Now, we forgave him. We did all that. But he did 4 years for it, too, right? You see, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. Forgiving doesn't mean I have to just go, oh, well, I'm willing to go get run over again, or I'm willing for somebody else to get hurt. No, that's not it. Forgiveness says, I'm not going to take joy into what happens with you. I'm going to begin to sit there and say, praise God, I can move forward because you've been held responsible. Big difference. And I want to be real clear on that. So the longer you keep looking behind, the longer you delay the future that Papa God has for you. Because one of the things is that the enemy's main goal is to distract you, right? By using what? Your history. Because you see, we keep looking at what happened, right? And even the Word talks about that. It talks about that the dude who was steering the deal to put seed down, right? He needs to keep looking forward. Because you know what happens? If you look back while you're hoeing a road, you got one messed up road, right? And so God says, keep looking. What happens if you run on a motorcycle, brother, and you like get fixated on something? Where are you going to go? Exactly. And if it's a tree, you just became a tree hugger. So, I mean, that's the point. You got to get your vision on God, on what His purpose is, not on what happened. See, Papa God keeps trying to draw you to the godly destiny that He has for you. He wants us to look at His love for us, because you know why? Then you're going to see your true validation through Him. You're going to see who y'all are through God's eyes. He has a plan. Jeremiah 29:11, it tells us, right? What does it tell us? For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. And they're plans that are what? They're good. And they're not for disaster. To give you a what? A future and a hope. Do you understand this? Most of us can't see that future or hope because we stuck back there. And He's like, man, I got so much for you. Now here's the deal. Here's the deal with Sue. You see, her story and your story is a testimony, not a tragedy. It's of how you came to the realization that victimization is not a choice. Victimhood is. I'm no longer going to volunteer myself to be used by my past. You can't control your history, but you can refuse to be controlled by your story. Right? There's where it all comes. Because you see, what a testimony is a story of overcoming and victory. It's not a story of how I was used. It's not a story of what happened to me. It's a story of God's victory. And He can give that to you. Oh, He can give that to you. Because I've watched it happen in my life. I watched it happen in Sue's life. I watched it happen in your life. I've watched it happen so many times that you can't deny that only God can get you through that.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment You were forgotten, you were not hopeless. You have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you.
So, Carrie, let me ask you the big question. Who's the only person that we want to turn our song over to?
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
forgive us
Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass